This is technically a two-parter, but you don't need to have seen part 1 because the complaints, I make don't really have any relation to each other. I will be briefly mentioning the Court of Owls, which I did talk about in part 1, but again, you don't need to have seen part 1 to follow. In an effort to save my throat, I have refilled my toddy, so let's get back into it. The reason this one point needed its own video is because there are so many things wrong with it that every one of those things needed its very own section. But before we get into it, we need to do a fair bit of backstory because this spans pretty much the entire show. So hold on to your bonnets and
prepare for one massive tantrum.
So Edward Nygma, the awkward but surprisingly deadly forensic scientist, kills a guy, kills another guy, gets the girl, accidentally kills the girl, is very sad about it, is then inexplicably happy about it, and goes out into the woods to bury her body. With me so far? Good. Oswald Cobblepot, also known as the Penguin, manages to climb his way up from Umbrella Boy to an underboss to with nothing other than his own cunning. Unfortunately though, a new villain called Theo Gallivan enters the mix and wants Oswald to kill all the mayoral candidates so he can be mayor.
You need an assassin. This is Gotham. You can find them in the phone book, under A.
Oswald refuses, but Gallivan kidnaps his mother to force him to do what he wants, and he does, but they kill his mother anyway right in front of him. They try to kill him too, but he manages to escape even though he is severely wounded, and winds up in the woods where he meets Ed Nygma. And diehard fans of the show, I know they met briefly in the GCPD beforehand. Give me a break if I leave stuff out. Trying to keep things simple here. So Ed takes him home, treats his wounds, and tries to get him back to his old self, but Oswald, having lost the only person who truly loved him, is not exactly amenable to this. Why is Ed doing this, you might ask? Well, as it turns out, Ed has become really interested in this whole murder business and wants to be better at it. Look at how excited he is about his new hobby. So he says to Oswald, hey, I started murdering people, and Oswald asks, how many? Ed's like, 3, and Oswald's like, bitch please. And Ed's like, hey, you're really good at murder. Can you teach me how to be a better murderer, please? And Oswald, despite what he will say to get out of a prison sentence later, is not actually insane. So he says, what? No. Fuck you, no. You crazy man, no. But Ed is undeterred, so in an effort to perk Oswald up, kidnaps one of Gallivan's lackeys so they can kill him. Like a cat bringing home a half-dead bird. I'm not kidding, that's exactly what this is like. But Oswald, like most cat owners, is not exactly appreciative of this kind gesture.
I bring her a dead bird, she throws it out. I bring her a dead mouse, right in the garbage. There's nothing I do good enough for you, mother!
Still, Ed is persistent. He talks to Oswald, he sings him a song, he says it won't hurt forever, and then he says this.
Your mother is dead because of your weakness. But what you need to realize is that your weakness was her.
Oswald, for some reason, doesn't gut him for this. And they do some more talking, they share some jokes, they share some laughs over Chinese food, and eventually Oswald says, okay, I guess I can teach you some stuff. Bring out the bird. And they presumably have a jolly old time killing and dismembering this random henchman. After being roommates for a brief period and 2 separate stints in Arkham Asylum, they are reunited just as Oswald is running for mayor. Ed manages his campaign and becomes his chief of staff after victory, so they now have control of Gotham both legally and illegally. Oswald shows Ed his true potential and teaches him the ins and outs of being a criminal mastermind, and Ed gives Oswald some much-needed self-confidence. Honestly, homicide notwithstanding, their friendship is actually really sweet. Ed is both jealous of Butch's position in Oswald's confidences and suspicious of him, so he exposes the man as a traitor, saves Oswald's life, and says,
I hope you know, Oswald. I would do anything for you.
Which is the catalyst for Oswald falling in love with him. And if you think that was a lot to take in, that was the prologue.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
So this is things about Gotham that get on my tits, but everything up until now has been pretty well written, so what's the problem? Well, my little chickadees, Before Oswald can confess his feelings to Ed, Ed runs into a woman who looks identical to the girlfriend he killed earlier in the show. No, I'm not kidding. And not only that, she just happens to love riddles. Not only that, she just happens to fall in love with him instantly. Not only that, she is totally fine with the fact that he's a former Arkham patient. I'm not done. She is completely cool with one of his victims being a woman who looks exactly like her. I'm still not done. She is so sure that after a few days of dating, he won't hurt her that she dresses up as his dead ex-girlfriend and goads him into putting his hand around her neck to prove he won't. Good fucking God, someone wrote this. Someone was paid to write this. I watched it, and now you get to hear me talk about how stupid it is. So
Prepare for one massive tantrum.
everyone hates this storyline. Everyone has made fun of it. Everyone has pointed out what's wrong with it. But I rarely ever hear anyone talking about just how much it screws up Ed's characterization. Gotham's characterization of the Riddler is probably one of the best, most evenly paced, most satisfying characterizations I have ever seen. It's 2.5 seasons of careful progression, going from a shy, awkward forensic analyst to embracing the darker part of himself, to learning how to be a criminal mastermind, to becoming a fully realized Riddler. It's amazing. Except for this one thing that completely ruins it.
And I've gone nowhere. Nowhere!
Okay, to talk about this properly, we have to go back to Season 1. Season 1 Ed seemed to want what everyone wants. A satisfying job, good friends, a pretty wife, 2.5 kids, the whole thing. But also seemed like someone who so desperately wanted a human connection but had been so starved of it that he genuinely didn't know how to go about getting it. So the girl he killed is called Kristen Kringle, and Ed had a crush on her. She finds him off-putting, but after saving her life and killing her boyfriend, she decides to give him a chance. That is until he tells her he killed her former boyfriend, then she freaks out, and he accidentally chokes her while trying to explain himself. Remember how I said he was sad about it and then inexplicably happy about it? Well, after having killed her, it suddenly occurs to him that he has been twisting himself in knots trying to get her and other people to like him, and not only has it been making him miserable, it's not been working. The second he shows a sliver of his true self, normal people run. So after Oswald kills Isabella, and we'll get into Oswald killing her, that's its own set of problems. Ed saying this,
I could have lived a life with the woman I loved.
Just completely obliterates all the character growth you had done up to this point. Just imagine a road, and you have point A, B, C, and D. Point A being relatively harmless, slightly creepy Season 1 Ed, B being embracing his darker impulses, C becoming a criminal, and D becoming a fully realized Riddler. If Ed's characterization is a car journey, it doesn't go from A to B to C to D. It doesn't even go from A to B to C and then turn around, because characters do regress. That can be decent characterization sometimes. But no, this car journey would be going from A to B to C, teleporting back to A, and then teleporting back to C immediately after like nothing happened. And this just ruins what would have been otherwise perfect character progression.
These murders changed me. And like the butterfly, I've come to realize that I cannot be a caterpillar once again.
But yeah, Ed, you just slide right back on into that chrysalis. That's fine, that's great. So we've talked about Ed's character. Let's talk about the creepy clone herself. For all the reasons I mentioned above, this woman is a nut job. First off, instant die for you in love with a guy she's known for a couple of days. even Disney princesses would be looking at this girl and telling her to get a grip. Ed too. The show itself even points out how freaking ridiculous this is.
With the woman you claim to be in love with after only knowing for a few hours?
Is it just me? Am I seeing things in an effort to make this blatant stupidity make sense? But to me, it looks like she's being framed as sinister here. Because this kind of abject, instant devotion and immediate love of every single hobby Ed has comes across as incredibly creepy and stalkerish. I know I'm not the only one who thought there was something up with this girl, because God forbid that would have actually made sense, but we'll get into that in the next section. She is coincidentally interested in everything Ed is interested in, and by everything, I mean everything.
Fun fact, the tibia is the second largest bone in the body.
Second only to the femur.
Who else got serious Gone Girl vibes from this woman?
Cool girl is hot. Cool girl is game. Cool girl is fun. Cool girl never gets angry at her man.
If that creepiness wasn't bad enough, she is totally fine with the fact that he murdered someone who is identical to her. If I were dating a guy who I found out to have murdered someone with physical similarities to me, my instant reaction wouldn't be, oh, but he's such a great guy and he loves me, he would never hurt me. It would be, I'm gonna end up on one of those true crime documentaries, aren't I? You would not see the dust on my feet, I would be out of there so fast. As would any normal person. This woman is waving so many red flags in Ed's face that they're practically behind his glasses. And lastly, her dressing up as his dead girlfriend takes her from being a Fatal Attraction reject into full-on Arkham patient in waiting. Ed, there is a sound you should be hearing right now. I believe you're familiar with it. And what's worse is this is framed like her helping him get over his fear. Writers, maybe you need a few months in Arkham if you think that this is in any way healthy for either of them. How is him trying to leave here anything other than a reasonable reaction? How is her slapping him and goading him into putting his hand around her neck anything other than abusive? You sick writers. And what makes this even more frustrating is this is framed like it's all fine. Like she's freeing him of his past sins and her love can cure him and make him a better person. And just to add to my exasperation...
Why?
Everything I mentioned before would be totally fine if there were a reason for it. This show has brought people back from the dead before. Is this Kristen come back from the dead to take revenge? Weird and lazy, but it would have made more sense. This show would also display later that it was not shy of pulling twins out of nowhere. So did Kristen have a twin who has seeked Ed out and wants to destroy his life for murdering her sister? A little soap opera, but again would have made much more sense than what they actually did. This show also has clones. Is she a mysterious clone that has been dispatched to hurt Oswald's position as he is at the height of his power and Ed is kind of Oswald's ace in the hole? No, to all of the above. To make it even worse, the uncanny nature of this character means that people were just waiting for the show to reveal what she really was. Especially since alongside this, there was a Court of Owls story involving clones. Oswald even meets the head of the court. They even talk about Isabella in this conversation. You expect your audience to watch these two plots side by side and just accept that there happens to be a woman who perfectly resembles Ed's first love at the high point of Oswald's power just as the court are making moves. Where did you learn your craft, Gotham writers? Because wherever you did, you definitely deserve your money back. The one time the Court of Owls would have actually made a story better and you didn't use them? So yeah, She's not Kristen. She's not a twin. She's not a clone. She's just a riddle-loving woman who believes in love at first sight with no self-preservation, and the script is trying desperately to convince you that she's normal and the loss of her is important because... Next.
Isabella was my everything, and you took her from me.
Perhaps the most infuriating thing about this, other than what it does to the intelligence of the characters and the way it treats the audience's intelligence, is that Kristen is now close to meaningless in Ed's eyes. They try so desperately to convince you that her looking like Kristen means that this is Ed's second chance at a normal life, which I have already explained ruins his character development, and an opportunity to make up for the one murder he actually regrets. But it has the effect of turning Ed's first love into a goldfish he flushed down the toilet and replaced with a new one. Kristen was a secondary character, and her purpose in the show was solely Ed's character development, but at the same time she still felt like a three-dimensional human being with her own thoughts and interests, only to be replaced by someone written to be Ed's Stepford bride. Ed, you've got something on your glasses there, might want to take a look at that. Meaning that he didn't love her for her sparky nature, her kindness, or her vulnerability. He just thought she was pretty, which has the effect of making Ed look incredibly fickle, which again may have been interesting if it was framed that way, but no, it's framed as true love. It's bad enough that Isabella was a walking plot device, but she has the catastrophic effect of turning Kristen into a walking plot device. Right, who else did this storyline ruin? Almost as insulting as what they do to Kristen is what they do to Oswald. This is a man who played Gotham's entire underworld against each other, and when he was caught and about to face death, he got both sides to turn on each other with one line. That's pretty freaking impressive. But in trying to get this nobody out of his way, he just cuts her brakes and leaves a trail of evidence that the greenest GCPD rookie could follow, never mind one of the smartest people in Gotham who used to be a forensic scientist. It's just sad how much this storyline insults Oswald's intelligence. Ed's too, but I guess you can argue that it is in character for his brain to turn to mush in the face of a pretty woman. Speaking of mush...
Who marries a man she just met?
It's true love!
What would have had me howling with laughter if it didn't get on my tits was the whole idea that love should be about sacrifice. Not funny in and of itself, but trying to convince me that this is an appropriate lesson to teach the most notorious crime boss in Gotham and be taught to him by a man who killed his previous love. Dumb. It's so freaking dumb.
Disappointed!
I understand that for Ed's character to grow, he and Oswald had to be separated. If he was going to become the Riddler, he couldn't remain Oswald's second forever. But this friendship was so entertainingly written, and the characters and actors worked so well off each other, that the level of audience investment means that people were going to be disappointed. So you have to make it a satisfying end. They don't. Because the foolish audience were waiting for the reveal of what Isabella was, so they didn't care about her on a personal level. That, coupled with everything I've just said, the creepy and unstable way her character behaves, the fact that he knew her for a week, the fact that Ed and Oswald have more history and chemistry so she feels like an interloper, the stupid message about love and sacrifice, the fact that Ed tests his loyalty on that front, a test which Oswald passes as Barbara tries to get him to betray Ed, but even after driving him crazy, making him think he loved him back, desecrating his father's remains and tearing down his empire. Look, Oswald is undoubtedly the villain in this scenario. I am by no means here to deny that. But hang on, doesn't this look a little familiar? Ed, you hypocrite! Though I suppose it doesn't hurt that everyone on this show is a raging hypocrite, even Jim Gordon.
So, the insane serial killer who hates cops warned you to save your life because why now?
Because I'm against dirty cops.
Except all of the times you are one.
Considering who these two characters are, the morality they live by, the fact that Ed killed his own love rival, and the state of his week-long relationship with Isabella, it feels like Ed's overreacting here.
I loved her, Oswald. And you killed her.
Don't worry, Ed, we'll get you another goldfish. And even after all that, Ed shoots him anyway.
I loved her, Oswald. And you killed her.
Ed, you knew her for a fucking week, and you were already thinking about murdering her! And that was worth murdering your best friend over? The only person who ever really understood and appreciated you for you? Which brings us quite nicely to...
Well, is it relevant to presume that a hottie in that costume is automatically radically fake?
Depending on the time of day, the French go either way.
Now, this is not going to turn into a discussion about diversity in media. That is a conversation worth having, but it's not the point of this video. That is not what gets on my tits. I've often talked about how I hate setups that aren't resolved and resolutions that aren't set up, because the latter is lazy writing and the former is squandering any good writing you did have. That is what I see with the portrayal of Ed's sexuality here. I mean, just look at this guy.
Tabby, the tigress, ran. You all look just dandy in your uniforms. Winner takes me.
But to be fair, that in and of itself is not really indicative of anything. You can be camper than a row of tents and still be straight. Then there's how he looks at and interacts with Oswald, but absent his other behaviours, that can be put down to Ed's minimal social graces and lack of understanding of how platonic boundaries are supposed to work. There is, of course, this.
You always were a smart cookie, Foxy. Have you always been Foxy? Foxy? Hello.
Only one person refers to me as Foxy.
But that can easily be put down to Ed's teasing nature coupled with his love of wordplay. But there is no, I repeat, no, explaining this. Now, it's already been stated that Oswald is gay and in love with Ed. But remember, this is not Oswald. Ed is hallucinating here. This is all Ed.
What are you doing?
What are you doing, Ed? Enough! You know what I need right now? I need the gayest man in the world and the straightest man in the world. I need opposite ends of the Kinsey scale in this room right now to tell me if there is any straight way to read this scene. Please. Please. Now, the second you start defining a character by their sexuality, they become a token. And it's often a facet of the character that doesn't bear mentioning until romantic subplots come into play. So, am I demanding that Ed's frankly apparent bisexuality be canon here? Yes. As I've said, it normally doesn't matter. But when you play it as if it's the case, when you set it up this hard, when it plays into one of the longest running subplots of the show, I expect a resolution. And I know fans can be unreasonably demanding of writers sometimes, especially the shipping community, but I totally sympathise with people's disappointment here, because this is just taking the piss. It's not quite supernatural levels of taking the piss, but just enough to get on my tits. And finally...
What the hell?
I'm not gonna tell you again!
Put down the gun.
Do what I tell you!
Okay, I'm going.
I love you, sweetie!
Okay, I love you too. Night night.
So, like I said, Ed needed to break away from Oswald to become the Riddler, and for it to be entertaining, it most likely needed to be a messy break. The way they did it was, well, I've likely spent half the length of an episode of Gotham telling you what it is, but we're here now. They are now enemies. This could have been amazing. While I am partial to watching characters go up against each other in a physical battle, an intellectual battle is sadly comparatively rare in media, but ripe with potential. Two of Gotham's most popular characters, both of which known for their intelligence, going up against each other in a battle of wits. They squander this premise repeatedly. The battles they do have are little more than pointing guns at each other and conveniently not following through for various reasons. The Penguin and the Riddler, two of the smartest, most cunning characters you have, known for their scheming and planning, just capture each other in a never-ending two-person Mexican standoff. It's depressing how much potential is lost here. These are two evenly matched characters, both of which have a reasonable chance of beating the other. Yes, Ed is considerably more intelligent in the usual way we view and measure intelligence, but as a result of this, he tends to rely heavily on his own superior intellect and not think too hard about his opponent's capabilities, so if someone is smart enough to figure out the answer, he's pretty much screwed. This puts him at a serious disadvantage going up against Oswald, who always pays attention to his enemies and is not only an expert at anticipating behaviour, but is very good at thinking on his feet and adjusting his strategy on the fly. Ed does have his own skills when it comes to manipulation, but that follows a more logical pattern of thinking and is effective only when people don't expect it and aren't in a position to think critically themselves. Once again, other people's intelligence trips Ed up constantly. Ed does manage to manipulate Oswald, but only when he doesn't see it coming. Now that Oswald knows Ed is his enemy, the man's feelings for him are only going to get him so far. Whereas Oswald is so good at manipulation that no matter how much people hate him, and even know they're being played, he is able to move people into the exact position he wants. If I had to contextualise the differences in their intelligence, I would say that Ed is a chess player, whereas Oswald is a speed chess player. Ed comes up with better thought out plans and is harder to get around, but if you do manage to get around him, you pretty much have him beat. Whereas Oswald is easier to topple and has been toppled on multiple occasions, but he will always readjust his strategies and has this almost Super Saiyan effect of coming back even stronger than he was before he was almost defeated. So the unimaginative way these writers pitted these two against each other is so disappointing. The only part I kind of like is where Oswald tricks Ed and has him frozen. For some context, Jim is about to do a prisoner exchange and hand Oswald over to Ed, but they are interrupted by Barbara. Oswald takes the chance and runs, Ed goes after him and gets captured, and then it looks like Ed manages to get the upper hand and takes him back to the docks where he killed him the first time. It is then revealed that Oswald has been playing Ed since he woke up and manipulated him into bringing him to those docks where his allies are waiting. Now, good things about this. Once again, it shows Oswald thinking on his feet, as he didn't plan for Barbara, so just took the chance when it came. It shows how well he knows people, Ed in particular, as he called his allies and told them where to meet him before he even planted the idea in Ed's head. However, this has the effect of revealing this to not really be a battle of wits, rather just Oswald smacking Ed over the head and fucking with him for half an hour. Oswald didn't defeat Ed with his intelligence, he just got lucky and knocked him out. Plus, it was a pretty stupid and unnecessary risk to take. He had Ed defeated with a hit, but decided to risk it all for the chance to say, "Gotcha?" Is Oswald petty enough to take this risk? Yes. But once again, it has the effect of diminishing a character's intelligence in an attempt to display it. This is the best Oswald versus Ed interaction we get, and it's mediocre if I'm being charitable. So those are the reasons this ludicrous subplot gets on my tits. It's nonsensical. It's not fun in any way. Everyone involved has to take a whole bottle of stupid pills for the plot to make any sense, and nothing valuable comes as a result of it. Okay, I am done. I have written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 pages.
Front and back.
In 2 days, I am officially done complaining about this show that I get so frustrated by, but still love in equal measure, because there are things about it that are so good. Sadly though, it does have a lot in common with another cape show that is not so good and has none of the charm that Gotham has, but is sadly getting renewed for another season. Tell me what you think it is in the comments. Like and subscribe, thanks.